The Abrams tank is one of the U.S. military's most valuable war machines. It first made a name for itself in Operation Desert Storm during the First Gulf War between Iraq and a coalition of nations led by the U.S. Just under 2,000 of them were deployed to face off against half as many T-72 tanks that Iraqi despot Saddam Hussein had imported from the Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia, and Poland. The T-72s were crewed by a men of Saddam's elite Republican Guard, nicknamed the Babylon Lions. The M1A2 Abrams, a much newer design than the outdated T-72 tanks, displayed superiority over its Soviet-made opponent. On the attack, the Abrams was absolutely unbeatable. Unlike their adversaries, they employed thermal imaging technology and laser rangefinders so that their powerful 120mm guns could fire accurately and far, even in poor weather and low visibility. This can best be illustrated at the Battle of Medina Ridge between the U.S. 1st Armored Division and the Iraqi RGFC Medina Armored Division. The engagement commenced when the Iraqi 2nd Armored Brigade, positioned on a sandy slope, were attacked without warning by the American 2nd Iron Brigade, firing from as far as 1.86 miles or 3,000 meters away. The Abrams' depleted uranium sabot rounds took about 2 to 3 seconds to reach their targets, packing such a punch that they were able to pass through the Iraqi sand cover to score direct, devastating hits. Lacking the same imaging tech and range, the helpless T-72s could do nothing but fire blindly back and hope for the best. The result was that over the course of 15 minutes, most of the tanks on Medina Ridge were disabled by catastrophic explosions that flung turrets up to 40 feet or 12 meters into the air. Having laid waste to the enemy and reduced their armor to smoke-billowing wreckage, the Americans were ordered forward to take the initiative. With the tanks advancing in unison from the line, the exhausted Iraqis were relentlessly smashed with more depleted uranium rounds from the main gun, as well as additional fire from Browning .50 caliber machine guns. The speed of the M1 Abrams meant that within a short space of time, they were within 1,970 feet or 600 meters of their targets. As the victorious Americans closed in, they were met by the sight of smoking, destroyed, and abandoned T-72 tanks and support vehicles, together with shell-shocked Iraqi soldiers throwing their hands up in surrender. When the fighting stopped, the U.S. 1st Armored Division had destroyed about 190 tanks and 130 armored infantry vehicles. In other words, they had essentially wiped out an entire Iraqi armored division in a single day. The rest of the war followed this pattern. By the end of the conflict, more M1 Abrams had been lost through friendly fire than enemy action. Development. The stellar showing of the M1 Abrams in the Gulf War against the Soviet tanks would have been extremely satisfying to those that were involved in the initial concept of the new tank. That's because the project was initially started in the 1970s over fears that Red Army tanks were technologically superior. The XM1 program began in January of 1973 as a design competition between Chrysler and General Motors. Both companies had to make sure their entries met a set of requirements laid out by the U.S. Army. The 1973 Yom Kippur War between Israel and a coalition of Arab states led by Egypt and Syria had a major influence on these. During that conflict, Israeli tanks plated with conventional steel armor were decimated by a Soviet high-explosive anti-tank or heat missile, referred to by NATO as an AT-3 Sager. Consequently, the XM1 had to be fitted with British-developed multi-layered Chobham armor. This incorporates ceramics and other non-metallics over the top of steel that make it more resistant against heat missiles. Aside from this, the prototypes also had to have sufficient protection against the 115mm APF SDS projectile fired by the Soviet T-62 tank. In November 1976, a modified version of the Chrysler design was chosen, leading to the manufacture of the first batch of XM1s from early 1978. The first production unit was rolled out 2 years later. It was named the M1 Abrams, in reference to Crichton Abrams, who had been the head of the U.S. Army in the latter stages of the Vietnam War, and one of the XM1's most fervent advocates before his death. Over the next 40 or so years, the M1 Abrams went through a series of upgrades. In 1985, it became the M1A1, when it was given an armor makeover to deal with the new Soviet 125mm gun. Next up was the M1A2, which was supplemented with more advanced positional, navigational, information and command systems from 1989. Variants, size, and crew. Nowadays, the U.S. Army Tank Corps is principally made up of M1A1 SA, M1A2 SEP-V2, and M1A2 SEP-V3 Abrams. The M1A2 is 11.9 feet or 3.65 meters wide, 9.4 feet or 2.88 meters high, 25.9 feet or 7.92 meters long, and it weighs around 69.5 U.S. short tons or 63,000 kilograms. It's manned by a crew of 4, which includes a commander, gunner, loader, and driver. Armament and protection. The main armament of the M1A2 is a 120mm smoothbore M256 cannon that's able to fire a variety of armor-piercing and anti-tank rounds. Above this is a standard 50 caliber or 12.7mm Browning M2HB heavy machine gun used by the commander, and to the right and left of this are 7.62mm M240 machine guns operated by other crew members. It also features an M250 6-barreled smoke grenade discharger installed on either side of the turret. Additional smoke screens can be put down by another system that's situated in the engine. The M1A2 is shielded by Chobham armor that's reinforced by a layer of ultra-dense depleted uranium, which provides ample protection against anti-tank guided missiles and RPGs. Powertrain and accessories. The M1A2 is propelled by an AGT 1500 gas turbine engine. With this, it has a maximum combat range of about 264 miles or 425 kilometers and a top speed of 42 miles an hour or 68 kph. It's also able to traverse over water at a maximum depth of 6.6 feet or 2 meters. Another cool ability is that it can pass over any vertical obstacle up to a height of 3.4 feet or about 1 meter. The M1A2 has a number of accessories that make it an efficient battlefield predator. Firstly, its thermal imaging system, which is connected to all gun sights, can magnify narrow field of view by up to 10 times, and a wide field of view by up to 3 times. This, in combination with a laser rangefinder that calculates distance, allows for easier and quicker target identification. Adding to this lethality is the Commander's Control Handle Assembly, or CCHA. This is hooked up to a camera that can be independently moved around by the commander. Once an enemy has been located, the commander can push a button that automatically pivots the gun turrets towards the target. The tank is also safeguarded against all forms of nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare by an NBC, or Nuclear, Biological, and Chemical Defense System. This provides breathing masks with filtered air and makes the internal pressure of the tank greater to keep out radioactive dust and elements. Performance on the 21st century battlefield. Now that's all done and dusted, let's see how it's performed in more recent wars. In the 21st century, they saw a lot of action in Iraq, where they mainly supported counterinsurgency operations. Several hundred of them even participated in the initial U.S. ground invasion of Iraq as part of Operation Iraqi Freedom. To deal with the threat of improvised explosive devices, or IEDs, the Abrams fleet was installed with IED jammers that disrupted the remote radio signal often required to detonate them. They were also strengthened with more armor on the sides and underbelly to deal with more sophisticated Iranian mines called explosively formed penetrators, or EFP. In contrast, they weren't as heavily featured in Afghanistan because of the country's rocky and difficult terrain doesn't suit them, so only 16 were sent there in late 2010. The other major 21st century conflict they've been involved with is the current Russia-Ukraine war. In October of 2023, the U.S. completed a transfer of 31 M1A1 tanks to the armed forces of Ukraine. The Abrams, however, have not had the intended impact. In April 2024, the Ukrainians pulled them out because too many of them were being detected and destroyed by Russian drones. In addition, being an older model, many of the crews have complained that they don't have good enough armor to counteract the latest weapons. If its experience in Ukraine is anything to go by, it seems the M1 Abrams has not adapted well to a modern battlefield that is increasingly relying on manned and unmanned flying vehicles to get the job done. Leopard 2 MBT cross-section. Germany earned a reputation for impressive tank designs, something that continued well after the Second World War. During the Cold War, with fears of Soviet tanks causing more than a few sleepless nights, German engineers developed the Leopard 2, a main battle tank that not only could stand toe-to-toe with Soviet armor, but is still used today as the backbone of many armored forces around the world. Development of the Leopard 2 began in the mid-1960s. Germany had equipped its forces with the Leopard main battle tank. Though a solid tank, it barely entered service when intelligence reports indicated that the Soviets were in development of a tank that would utilize a powerful 125mm main gun, the T-64. Almost instantly, development began on something that could challenge the new Soviet design. The initial plan was a joint project between West Germany and the United States, which led to 14 prototypes of the MBT-70. In spite of this, disagreements about specifications, along with cost overruns, led to the project being cancelled. The Americans would then go on to design what would become the M1 Abrams. West German manufacturer Krauss-Maffei began development on the new tank independently, and over a long series of experiments, the first prototypes of what would become the Leopard 2 were ready for testing in 1972. After a few more years of testing, the Leopard 2 was officially approved by the West German government in 1977 and entered service in 1979. Variants. The Leopard 2 has seen continuous service in the German and other militaries for almost half a century, and over that time there have been numerous variants, each one with modifications that incorporated the latest technological innovations. The base model is designated the Leopard 2 A0, and the majority of sub-variants labeled the A1 through A7, each one seeing changes to the weaponry, communications gear, optics, computer systems, or any number of other modifications. There's also a PSO version, which stands for Peace Support Operations, which was modified for urban warfare, such as having a shorter barrel, non-lethal weapons, and more all-around protection. There were also experiments to equip the Leopard with a larger 140mm main gun, which was designated the Leopard 2 140. There are also variants for training and vehicle recovery. The Leopard 2 is used by many other nations who have modified the tank for their own doctrines and purposes, such as the Finnish Leopard 2R, which is used for clearing minefields, and the Pioneer Panzer III Kodiak, a turretless engineering vehicle used by Switzerland. An A8 version of the Leopard 2 was shown to the public for the first time in May 2023 and will be the latest version of this long-serving vehicle. Dimensions. The Leopard 2 A6 has a length of 32 feet, including the main gun, a width of just over 12 feet, and is around 8 feet high. It weighs in at 68 tons, though it's important to note that this is the 2A6 version, and the exact size can vary greatly depending on the specific variant. Armament. The initial design of the Leopard 2 revolved around the use of a powerful 120mm main gun, which was designed to tear through whatever the Soviet Union could throw at it. Earlier versions used a stabilized Rheinmetall L44 cannon, with later versions using the longer L55, which gave the projectile a higher muzzle velocity. The standard ammunition capacity is 42 rounds, stored in the turret with additional shells in the hull. The Leopard 2 also has two MG3 7.62mm machine guns, updated versions of the MG42 machine gun. One is coaxial to the main gun, while the other is mounted on top of the turret. The A7 version has an internal weapons control system that allows the turret-mounted machine gun to be fired from inside the tank. Protection. The armor of the Leopard 2 has evolved greatly over the years. The tank makes use of spaced armor, which means that there are two layers of protection. When a projectile hits the outer plate, it will either detonate or tumble, reducing the kinetic energy of the impact before it hits the main layer of protection. More recent variants use composites of steel, tungsten, and ceramic. The exact makeup and thickness of the armor is speculated, though is classified and difficult to confirm. The A5 variant began the use of an arrowhead-designed turret with sloped armor, giving the Leopard its sleek appearance. The A5 and A6 also feature thicker armor on the turret and the side skirt, which gives additional protection against RPGs. Given experiences during peacekeeping operations, later versions also have additional protection against mines and IEDs. The Leopard 2 is also protected against NBC, energy or nuclear, biological, and chemical threats, utilizing an overpressurization system that seals off and filters air into the vehicle. 2023 photographs taken from the conflict in Ukraine showed the Leopard, specifically an A4, equipped with explosive reactive armor, though this seems to be a later addition and not standard practice. The Leopard also has a built-in fire suppression system, which will activate automatically should the internal temperature of the tank reach over 180 degrees Fahrenheit, though it can be triggered manually. Crew. The Leopard 2 is operated by a crew of 4, a driver, commander, loader, and gunner. The driver is located on the front right of the lower hull. The rest of the crew is located in the turret, the gunner located at the front right of the turret, the commander behind him, and the loader is positioned at the left side of the turret. Engine, performance, and other capabilities. The most recent versions of the Leopard, the 2A4, 2A5, and 2A6, are propelled by an MTU MB873-KA501 series 12-cylinder turbocharged diesel engine, which is capable of generating up to 1,479 horsepower. This power plant can move the tank at around 45 miles an hour on the road, making the Leopard 2 one of the fastest main battle tanks in the world. The 317-gallon fuel capacity located in 4 tanks has a range of about 340 miles. The transmission is automatic with 4 forward gears and 2 reverse gears. The Leopard 2 uses a torsion bar spring suspension system with hydraulic dampeners and has 7 rubber-coated road wheels and 4 return rollers per side. As one of the most advanced tanks still in the world, with nearly half a century of service, there are many other features that the Leopard uses to operate at maximum potential. These can include laser range finders, night vision capabilities, and advanced communication gear. Users. In addition to Germany, many nations use the Leopard 2 as their primary tank. These nations include, but are not limited to, Austria, Greece, Portugal, Spain, Canada, Norway, Poland, and many others. Many were also sent to Ukraine as part of aid packages to that nation in the face of the Russian invasion. The Leopard 2 in action. The Leopard 2 first saw action during peacekeeping operations in Kosovo in 1998. Since then, it's been used in multiple conflicts, including peacekeeping in Bosnia-Herzegovina, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Ukraine. In Afghanistan, a Canadian-operated Leopard was struck by an IED and survived with no casualties. Canadian Leopards also survived Taliban ambushes on several occasions, surviving them all. During Operation Red Dagger in 2008, Danish Leopards held the flank of the British-led advance in the Helmand province and were critical for the success of the operation. There are some combat operations that tarnish the otherwise glowing reputation of the Leopard. During the Battle of Al-Bab in Iraq, a reported 10 Turkish Leopards 2A4s were destroyed and 2 were captured by ISIS. The insurgents made use of IEDs and anti-tank missiles, targeting the turret, which set off the ammunition supply. These were earlier models which didn't have the anti-IED protection of the latter types. The Turkish troops also operated without infantry support, which made them even more vulnerable. In the conflict in Ukraine, Leopards were sent as part of aid packages and were the primary component of a major 2023 Ukrainian counteroffensive. Due to the nature of the conflict, accurate information is difficult to come by, but it is confirmed that at least 11 Leopards were destroyed by Russian forces. Many lost to unmanned drones, a new factor on an ever-evolving battlefield. With the nature of warfare constantly changing, the future of the Leopard 2 is unclear. Germany, along with France, are in development of a successor vehicle to replace the decades-old design. Still, it will take many years for this new vehicle to roll off the assembly line. And until that day, the Leopard 2 will still be the backbone of armored forces around the world.